My boss slammed his desk and growled, "Ethan, you're a liability. You're fired, effective immediately." After 10 years of managing projects at Apex Construction in Houston, that was how he repaid me for exposing his incompetence. My name's Ethan Marshall, 47 years old, and I'd spent a decade turning failing projects into successes, saving the company millions. But that Monday morning, in a cramped office overlooking a half-built skyscraper, my boss, Richard Holt, decided to throw me under the bus for pointing out his mistakes. I stayed calm, looked him in the eye, and said, "We'll see about that." He sneered, thinking he'd won. He didn't know I'd already planned my comeback. I started at Apex as a junior project manager, straight out of a messy career shift from engineering. I was 37, eager to prove myself, and Apex was a mid-sized firm with big dreams but bigger problems. Projects ran late, budgets ballooned, and clients walked away. I changed that. I streamlined workflows, renegotiated contracts, and brought in safety protocols that cut accidents by 30%. Within 5 years, I was lead project manager, overseeing a team of 20 and managing projects worth $10 million. Richard took credit for my work, parading my successes as his own at board meetings. I let him, thinking loyalty would pay off. I was wrong. The trouble started 6 months ago on a $20 million project, a new office tower downtown. Richard insisted on cutting corners, cheaper materials, fewer safety checks, shorter timelines. I warned him in a meeting with the team. "This will cost us more in the long run," I said. "The foundation's already showing cracks. We need to reinforce it now, or we'll have a disaster." Richard waved me off. "You're overreacting, Ethan. We're on budget and the client wants speed." I pushed back, showing him the engineering reports, but he ignored me. 2 weeks later, a section of the foundation failed, halting construction and costing us $3 million in repairs. The client threatened to sue. I documented everything, every email, every report, every meeting note where I'd raised concerns. I knew Richard would try to pin it on me, and he did. At a team debrief after the incident, he blamed me for the oversight, claiming I hadn't flagged the issue in time. My team knew the truth, they'd heard my warnings, but Richard controlled the narrative. The CEO, Tom Carver, called me in for a review. I showed him my documentation, proving I'd raised the alarm, but Richard twisted the story, saying I'd mismanaged the project. Tom gave Richard a warning, but let me take the fall with a formal reprimand. I kept my job, but I knew Richard was gunning for me. 3 months ago, I started preparing. I backed up all my project files on a personal drive, including emails where Richard dismissed my concerns. I recorded conversations with my team, capturing their support for my decisions. I also reached out to a friend, Lisa, who worked in HR, asking her to keep an ear out for any moves against me. She warned me last week. "Richard's looking for an excuse to fire you," she said. "He's been talking to Tom about cost-cutting, and your salary's on the chopping block." I thanked her and got ready. I knew Richard would make his move soon. The final straw came at a site meeting on Monday. We were behind schedule again, this time because Richard had ignored my advice on a subcontractor. The concrete pour was delayed, costing us $50,000 a day. I called him out in front of the team. "Richard," I said, "this is the third time your decisions have cost us. I warned you about this subcontractor, and you ignored me. We're bleeding money because of your incompetence." The team went silent, but I saw nods of agreement. Richard's face turned red. He pulled me into his office after the meeting, slamming the door. "You're a liability, Ethan," he growled. "You're done. Pack your things and get out." I didn't argue. I packed my desk, my hard hat, a photo of my team at a project groundbreaking, a mug from my first Apex project. 10 years fit into a small box. My team watched, some whispering, others shaking their heads. Carlos, a foreman I'd trained, approached me. "This isn't right, Ethan," he said. "You're the only one who knows how to run this place." I patted his shoulder. They'll figure that out soon enough. I left the site, the skyline of Houston stretching before me, and drove home. I wasn't defeated. I was focused. At home, I called Karen, my lawyer from a previous project dispute. Richard fired me for exposing his mistakes, I told her. I've got evidence, emails, recordings, reports that prove I was right and he was wrong. I want to take this to the CEO. Karen replied, "We can do better than that. If your evidence is as solid as you say, we can push for wrongful termination and sue for damages. Let's set up a meeting with Tom Carver." I agreed, sending her everything I had. I also reached out to Carlos and 2 other team members, asking if they'd testify to Richard's incompetence. They agreed without hesitation. That night I sat in my garage reviewing the files, emails from 6 months ago warning Richard about the foundation, recordings of him dismissing my concerns, calling me overly cautious, reports showing the financial losses from his decisions. I had enough to bury him. Richard thought he'd silenced me by firing me. He was about to learn what happens when you underestimate a man who's spent a decade building your company from the ground up. Tuesday morning, I sat in my garage in Houston, staring at the box of files I'd taken from Apex Construction. 10 years of project reports, emails, and recordings, all documenting Richard Holt's incompetence and my warnings he'd ignored. I knew he'd try to bury me after firing me for exposing his mistakes on that office tower project, but I wasn't going down without a fight. My lawyer, Karen, had scheduled a meeting with the CEO, Tom Carver, for Friday, and I needed to be ready. Richard thought he'd silenced me, but I was about to show him what happens when you fire the man who's been holding your company together. I called Carlos, my foreman, to confirm his testimony. "I'm in, Ethan," he said, his voice steady. "I saw everything. Richard ignoring your warnings, blaming you for his screw-ups. I'll tell Tom the truth." I thanked him and reached out to 2 other team members, Maria and Jamal, who'd also witnessed Richard's decisions firsthand. Maria, a scheduler, had emails proving she'd flagged the subcontractor issues to Richard months ago. Jamal, a safety officer, had photos of the foundation cracks I'd pointed out, time-stamped before the collapse. Both agreed to testify. "We're with you," Jamal said. "Richard's a clown. He doesn't deserve to lead us." That afternoon, I met Karen at her office downtown, the Houston skyline stretching out behind her window. She reviewed my files, nodding as she flipped through the emails. "This is gold, Ethan," she said. "You've got a clear paper trail showing Richard's negligence, warnings about the foundation, the subcontractor, the budget overruns. And these recordings? She played one," Richard's voice, dismissing my concerns. "Ethan's overreacting, he said in a meeting last month. We don't need to spend on safety checks." Karen smiled. "This proves he ignored you, and it cost the company millions. We'll push for wrongful termination and damages, but I think we can do more. Let's go for his job." I raised an eyebrow. "You think Tom will fire him?" Karen leaned back. "With this evidence, yes. Richard's cost Apex $3 million on this project alone, and the client's lawsuit is still pending. If you can show Tom you're the better leader, he'll have no choice." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. I'd spent a decade building Apex's reputation. I wasn't just taking Richard down, I was taking his place. Wednesday morning, I drove to the construction site, not to work, but to observe. I parked a block away, watching through the chain-link fence. The site was a mess. Cranes idle, workers standing around a pile of materials untouched. Richard was on the phone, pacing, his face red with frustration. I overheard him yelling at a subcontractor. "You were supposed to deliver yesterday," he shouted. "We're bleeding money," I smirked. He didn't know how to manage without me. Carlos spotted me and walked over, keeping his voice low. "It's chaos, Ethan," he said. "Richard's lost it. He's blaming everyone but himself. The client's coming tomorrow, and we're nowhere near ready." I nodded. "Keep me posted. I'll see you at the meeting." Friday. That afternoon I got a call from Lisa in HR. "Richard's spinning the story," she said. "He told Tom you were insubordinate. that you caused the delays by not following orders. He's trying to pin the whole project failure on you. I clenched my jaw. Of course he is. Thanks, Lisa. I've got evidence to prove he's lying. She sighed. Be careful, Ethan. He's desperate. I hung up, feeling the tension build. Richard was playing dirty, but I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't backing down. Thursday morning, I met with Maria and Jamal to go over their testimonies. Maria showed me her emails sent to Richard 6 months ago, warning him about the subcontractors' history of delays. He replied, use them anyway, they're cheap. Jamal pulled up his photos of the foundation cracks, dated 2 weeks before the collapse, along with a report I'd sent Richard, recommending immediate reinforcement. Richard had ignored it, costing us $3 million. We've got your back, Ethan, Maria said, her voice firm. He can't keep doing this. I thanked them, feeling a swell of gratitude. My team wasn't just supporting me, they were fighting for what was right. That afternoon, I prepared my presentation for Tom. I compiled the emails, reports, and recordings into a single file, adding a timeline of Richard's decisions and their consequences. I also wrote a proposal outlining my vision for Apex if I were in charge. Stricter safety protocols, better subcontractor vetting, and a focus on quality over cost cutting. I'd spent a decade proving I could lead. Now I'd prove I could. Do it better than Richard ever had. Karen reviewed the presentation, nodding. This is perfect, she said. You're not just exposing him. You're showing Tom why you're the better choice. Be ready for Richard to fight back. He'll try to discredit you. I smiled. Let him try. Thursday night, I sat at home, going over my notes one last time. I thought about the past 10 years, the late nights, the missed family events, the stress of keeping projects on track while Richard took the credit. I'd given Apex everything, and he'd thrown me out like I was nothing. But I wasn't nothing. I was the guy who'd saved their projects, their reputation, their profits. Richard thought he could erase me, but I was about to rewrite the story. I poured a glass of bourbon, staring at the Houston skyline through my window. Tomorrow, I'd take back what was mine. Friday morning, I arrived at Apex's headquarters in downtown Houston, a glass tower that gleamed in the morning sun. Karen, Carlos, Maria, and Jamal were waiting in the lobby, their faces a mix of nerves and determination. We're ready, Carlos said, clapping me on the shoulder. Let's do this. We took the elevator to the top floor, where Tom's office overlooked the city. Richard was already there, sitting across from Tom, his face smug. He didn't expect me to walk in with a team, a plan, and evidence that would bury him. Tom stood, shaking my hand. Ethan, I'm glad you're here, he said. Richard's made some serious accusations, but I want to hear your side. I nodded, setting my laptop on the table. I've got evidence that proves Richard's negligence cost Apex millions, I said, and I've got a plan to fix it. But first, let's start with the truth. I opened my presentation, starting with the emails, the recordings, the reports. Richard's face went pale as the timeline unfolded, showing every mistake, every ignored warning, every loss he'd caused. Carlos, Maria, and Jamal testified, their voices steady, their evidence damning. Richard tried to interrupt, but Tom silenced him. Let him finish, he said, his eyes narrowing. I knew then that Richard's days were numbered, and I was ready to take his place. Friday morning in Tom Carver's office, I watched Richard Holt's career implode as I presented my evidence. The emails, recordings, and reports laid out a clear picture of his incompetence, $3 million lost on the office tower project because he'd ignored my warnings about the foundation. Another $1 million in delays from a subcontractor I'd flagged as unreliable. Carlos, Maria, and Jamal testified, their voices steady as they confirmed my concerns and Richard's dismissals. Richard tried to interrupt, his face red with fury. This is a setup, he shouted. Ethan's lying to save himself. But Tom held up a hand, his expression grim. Let him finish, Richard, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I knew then that Richard was done. I moved to my final piece of evidence, a recording from 2 months ago. Richard's voice clear as he dismissed my safety concerns. "We don't need to spend on safety checks," he said. "Ethan's overreacting." The room went silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Tom turned to Richard, his eyes cold. "You cost us $4 million because you wouldn't listen," he said. "And then you fired the man who tried to stop it?" Richard stammered, trying to deflect. "I was protecting the company. Ethan was insubordinate. He mismanaged the project." But Tom wasn't buying it. "I've heard enough," he said. "Richard, you're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Richard's jaw dropped, his face paling. "You can't do this," he shouted, standing up. "I've given this company 20 years. Tom didn't flinch. "And Ethan's given us results," he replied. "You've given us losses. Get out." Security entered, 2 guards in black uniforms, and Richard was led out, cursing my name as he went. I stayed calm, my arms crossed, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle. In my chest, I'd exposed him, and now I'd take his place. Tom turned to me, his expression softening. "Ethan, I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have listened to you sooner. Your evidence is undeniable, and your team's loyalty speaks volumes. I'd like to offer you Richard's position, Senior Project Manager, with a 20% raise and full authority over operations. What do you say?" I glanced at Carlos, Maria, and Jamal, who nodded with pride, then at Karen, who gave me a subtle thumbs up. "I say yes," I replied, shaking Tom's hand. "Let's get Apex back on track." Tom smiled. "I knew you'd say that. Welcome to leadership." That evening, I took my team out to celebrate at a diner near the construction site, the smell of burgers and fries filling the air. Carlos raised his soda, grinning. "To Ethan," he said. "The boss we deserve." Maria and Jamal cheered, and I laughed, clinking my glass against theirs. "To us," I said. "We did this together. I'm nothing without this team." They smiled, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. I'd fought for them, for Apex, for what was right, and we'd won. Over the next week, I settled into my new role. Richard's office became mine, a corner space with a view of the Houston skyline. I cleaned out his clutter, replacing it with my hard hat, a photo of my team, and a new project plan I'd been drafting for months. I implemented the changes I'd proposed to Tom: stricter safety protocols, better subcontractor vetting, and a focus on quality over cost cutting. The office. Tower project got back on track, and the client dropped their lawsuit, impressed with the new direction. Within a month, we'd secured 2 new contracts worth $15 million, proof that Apex was stronger without Richard. I heard through Lisa in HR that Richard tried to start over, applying for project manager roles in Dallas, but his reputation was ruined. Word of his firing spread through the industry, and no one would touch him. He ended up taking a low-level consulting gig in Austin, a far cry from the senior position he'd held at Apex. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. His downfall was his own doing, and I was too busy building Apex's future to care. 6 months later, Apex was thriving. Our projects were on time, under budget, and the team's morale was higher than ever. I promoted Carlos to assistant project manager, gave Maria a raise for her scheduling work, and sent Jamal to a safety training program to lead our new protocols. Tom called me into his office one morning, a rare smile on his face. "Ethan, you've turned this company around," he said. "We're up 20% in revenue because of you. I'd like to offer you a seat on the board." I accepted, feeling a surge of pride. I'd gone from fired to flourishing, all because I'd stood up for what was right. One evening, I drove to the office tower site, now nearly complete. The skyscraper gleamed in the Houston sunset, its glass facade reflecting the orange sky. Carlos met me on the top floor, where we'd installed the final beam that day. "It's beautiful, Ethan," he said, looking out at the city. "You saved this project." I shook my head. "We saved it," I said. I couldn't have done it without you." He smiled, and we stood in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I thought about Richard, but not with anger. He'd tried to erase me, to protect his ego, but he'd only made me stronger. Back home, I sat on my porch, a beer in hand, the city lights twinkling in the distance. I'd kept a photo from my first Apex project, a snapshot of me and Richard at the groundbreaking, both smiling, full of hope. I pulled it out, looking at his face, the man who'd tried to destroy me. I didn't hate him. I pitied him. He'd thrown away everything, his career, his reputation, his legacy, while I'd built something better. I tore the photo in half, letting the pieces fall into the night. Some fights aren't about revenge, but about standing your ground. Richard thought he could fire me, blame me, erase me from Apex's story. But I'd rewritten it, not with malice, but with results. I'd taken his job not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I was the better man for it. Apex wasn't just a company anymore. It was my company, my team, my legacy. And as I watched the Houston skyline, I knew I'd come out on the right side of the blueprint, building a future Richard could never touch.